You have died before you die. Ego death was the final act of courage that liberated your transpersonal consciousness. You abandoned your name, your burden, your fear of time, and your attachment to your personal story. The question now is not whether you are healed, but what does the liberated consciousness do with the time it has left? The dominator culture taught us that life is a pursuit of pleasure or an escape from pain. The dominator ego lives for accumulation of wealth, status, experiences. But when the ego dies, accumulation becomes irrelevant. Redemption reveals that life is not accumulation. Life is service. Your final mission is not about what you will do for yourself. It is the action that naturally emanates from a consciousness that has nothing left to prove and nothing to lose. It is the logos living through you. Without the filter of self-sabotage or self-promotion, addiction and grief were tools, the logos, used to break your old identity and prepare you for this mission. Your radical transparency is your curriculum. If your personal story has died, what emerges is anonymous action service that is your only reason for being in the eternal now. What if the only way to ensure your dead ego does not resurrect is to dedicate yourself to a mission that is greater than your own name? If what you have heard so far has already made you thoughtful, stay with me to reflect on this and subscribe to the channel before you forget and miss the next voyages when the personal story dies. The motivation for action changes radically. The dominator ego acted for reward, recognition, praise, status, or the illusion of controlling the future. The nameless addiction was the immediate, destructive reward. Barren grief was the reward of self-pity. Transpersonal consciousness acts for flow. Service becomes the only way to live in the eternal. Now, without falling into the trap of anxiety, the logos demands anonymous action. The act of doing what is right because the logos requires it, and not because your name will be glorified. Your experience with repetition and addiction becomes your greatest resource for service. Your testimony of radical transparency is no longer about you. It is a tool of novelty that you deliver to communion to break the secrecy and isolation of another. You become a channel. The archaic revival demands a return to the tribal spirit, where the well-being of the individual is inseparable from the well-being of the community. Service is your ticket back to the totality of the body, the dominator. Ego's most likely resurrection will come when you do good and demand recognition for it. Anonymous service is the vigilance in the now that prevents that resurrection. The final mission is to be a portal of grace in the world without the need to sign the work. If your personal story has died, what is your legacy? The dominator ego defines legacy by accumulation. the house, the inheritance, the name on the plaque. This is the last illusion of the material world. The belief that you can bribe time and death with possessions. Transpersonal consciousness destroys that lie. Your only true legacy is the radical transparency you leave behind. Your testimony of fall and redemption is your most valuable asset. When you donate it, you do not lose it. You multiply it in communion and the new sphere. The legacy of transparency is the act of giving the others the only thing they truly need, the courage to face their own hell. Knowing someone has been there and survived. The immortality of ego death is the liberation from the fear of being vulnerable. When you die before you die, you discover that your testimony of addiction and grief is not a shame to be buried. It is your portal to immortality. The Logos needs your naked truth, your direct experience of His presence in the midst of your chaos. The final mission is to be a source of anonymous transparency, serving without the need for credit. Allowing the Logos to use your story as novelty for the world. Your name becomes irrelevant. Your service becomes eternal. You have mastered the alchemy of anonymous action. Now you are ready to comprehend the final consequence, the eternity of service. The dominator, ego, operates by transaction. I do this, I receive that. Even in redemption, it tries to negotiate. Anonymous service is the denial of this transaction. It is the final proof that your ego, death, is real. Anxiety is triggered by the expectation of an outcome. If you serve with the expectation of reward, you place your peace, the Lord's presence, in the hands of the tyrant of the calendar. Anonymous service destroys this anxiety. You act in the eternal now, purely out of flow and grace. Your reward is the action itself. The alignment with the Logos, addiction and repetition were fueled by the desire to relive a past pleasure or control the future. Anonymous service anchors you in the present through intentional action that has no past and no future. The ego dominators. Most likely, resurrection will come when you do something good and demand recognition for it. Anonymous service is the vigilance in the now that prevents that resurrection. You become the greater mind in action, living the archaic revival, the return. Now you are ready to comprehend the final consequence, the end of personal history. Your transpersonal consciousness does not care what the tyrant of the calendar records. Your name and your achievements are temporary. Your essence belongs to eternal history. The immortality of detachment is the realization that your immortality is not in your name, but in the quality of your consciousness that you inject into eternal history. Your testimony of radical transparency now belongs to the eternal history of the body of Christ. Your fall and your rebirth are no longer yours. They are a map and a language for those still trapped in addiction and grief. The final proof that your personal story has died is your joyful acceptance of the annihilation of your name. If someone is healed through your anonymous service, the glory does not return to you. It returns to the Logos. You become a silent co-creator of redemption. The final mission is to live a life so totally surrendered and transparent that your existence becomes a hymn of praise to the Lord's presence. Where the singer's voice, the ego, does not need to be identified for the melody grace. To be eternal, you closed the cycle of separation and entered the sacred geometry. The transpersonal consciousness reveals the truth of sacred time, the geometria sagrada of existence. The servigio animo is the act of returning to innocence, the purity of intention that existed before the personal story became a burden. The imagination, as an act of faith, allows you to actively help the Logos rewrite the script of your future. You become a silent co-creator of the sacred geometry, actively inserting grace and communion into the fabric of time. Your life is proof that history does not have to end in tragedy. It can ascend in a spiral of love and purpose. You reached the point where personal history curves and meets eternal history. You saw that ego death is not the end of life, but the beginning of transpersonal consciousness. The final plot twist is that you do not have to wait for physical death to discover who you truly are. You can die before you die now, in this eternal now. The Alegria de Eros is the energy that arises when you are not consuming the world's lies, but are actively creating your reality with the living word. Your final mission of anonymous service is not a heavy duty. It is your way of participating in the feast of existence. Your vigilance in the now is your cup. The cup must be empty without the baggage of the past, and the worry of the future to be filled with the wine of the Lord's presence. The price for living in the eternal now is your old, comfortable identity as a victim of time. But the reward is your peace, your joy of Eros, and your total freedom, I ask you. With the urgency of one who has completed the mission and sat at the table, what will be your first act of anonymous service in the eternal now, proving that your personal story has died and that the legacy of the Logos lives in you?